Alrighty folks, welcome back to another edition of LandO's Lock-ins, a series in which we go through CDL pick'ems. We do our best to try and make the most accurate predictions possible. Sometimes we succeed and sometimes we fail. This past week was actually pretty good, but spoiler alert, if you followed, by the way, if you followed every prediction from last week that I gave, you would have went 10 for 10. But you're saying, Landon, how in the world did you miss two? Yeah, I went back and I changed them. I changed them coming into the days. If I just would have left the pick'em screen blank, if I would not have opened this tab up on my browser throughout week number 2, we would have went 10 for 10. That 13-7 record would say 15-5. It would say a lot better than what it says right now. So again, a solid week. We go 8 for 10, you know, in terms of the way that week 2 looked, but just not as great as I would have maybe expected. I said I wanted to go 7 for 10. We go 8 for 10. So I really can't be mad. But at the same time, it's just, I literally called this one. I called this one. I knew the breach were going to take it. I just changed it to Paris last second for some reason. And I wish that I wouldn't have. But overall, it's been somewhat of a successful start to Major 1. Oftentimes, you know, this can be one of the more difficult you know, qualifiers or parts of the season to predict, because hey, you know what, it's a barometer. You're still trying to figure out how certain teams sit. You don't really know after 2 games, 3 games, how good a team is in a particular mode. So it's going to be fun as we continue to expand the sample size of these teams. We, you know, further cement the storylines that we've got going on. We're very familiar, right, with where a lot of the teams sit right now coming into this 3rd and final week of qualifier play. And that only sets up what is going to be an amazing Major 1 tournament. It's going to be the Optic Major. It's going to be a phenomenal time back at the Esports Stadium in Arlington, Texas. I'm stoked for that, only because I don't have to go very far in order to be there. And I hope to see you guys there as well. But anyway, it's a pleasure to have you here. Excited that we can go over our pick'ems together. And if you have any ideas of your own, you can feel free to let me know down in the comments, ways to improve the series. Also, to let me know your predictions, to let me know, you know, on Twitter as well, what your predictions are coming into this week. Love to see your guys' brackets. Love to see everybody tweet me their pick'em predictions. It's always a great time. So without further ado, let's jump in to week number 3, a massive week, really for every team. I mean, you could argue a few rosters are already cemented to be in the winner side or the loser side, but still, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for confidence coming into our first major, which is going to be an absolute blast over in Arlington, Texas. It's going to be where the Kickoff Classic was. That was a great event, and now it's going to be the Optic Major. But as I said, let's go and jump into our first game. Paris Legion taking on the LA Thieves. We'll start things off with the Thieves, right? Last week, they were able to go 2-0 throughout, you know, what was a solid opportunity for them. They lose to Atlanta FaZe in their very first match, which is to be expected. But they beat New York, right? It's the very first game where royalty is brought into the New York Subliners. He's announced basically a day or 2 before the game. They're able to take that one 3-1. They also beat the Mutineers in a wild game 5, a great series that one was, but they get past a roster that has upset potential. Like, if Mutineers were to take a top team to a game 5, I'm not surprised. I'm also not surprised if they were to have a shocking loss to a team that's probably below them in terms of overall skill. You just don't really know where to put this team. And speaking of not really knowing where to put rosters, that's the same way that I feel about the Thieves right now. I am not sure where to rank this team, right? They're able to beat a new team in the New York Subliners. Granted, it's their first game. You don't really know where to put New York at that moment. And then they also were able to take down a team that's also hot or cold. Are you angry that it goes to a game 5? Are you happy they just got past that match in the first place? You know, obviously it's a 2-0 week, so you will take it, but still, it's hard to know where they rank right now. But the big thing for the LA Thieves at this moment, right, is that they sit 5-1 in hardpoint so far throughout the Major 1 qualifiers. And the only loss that they have got is to the Atlanta FaZe. So that is a great sign if you are an LA Thieves fan. Also, if you're a Gorillas fan, by the way, because they're also great at a hardpoint. But big thing for the Thieves to me, something that has to be improved on is going to be search and destroy, right? That has to be better. A 1-3 record right now in S&D throughout our Major 1 qualifiers. They've lost a lot of close games. They also lost that search and destroy versus New York with royalty. Again, it's hard to judge because it's a new team. You're not really sure. The VODs really don't matter because royalty's playing. He's obviously a great search and destroy player. So again, there's just a lot of factors to where you want to take that game and apply it. But from a prediction side of things, it's really hard to know where they sit. So again, right now at 2-1, but they're facing off against the Paris Legion roster, who again is coming into this game with just not a whole lot of hope. Not a whole lot of hope, at least in terms of Major 1, right? They sit right now at 0-4, another 0-2 week, and you have to feel for these guys. Out of the 16 maps that they have played, they've only won 4 of them. 2 of those 4 victories have been on Gavutu Control. 1 is on Gavutu Hardpoint, and the other one is a round 11 Search Destroy that they took versus Florida on Tuscan. So not a whole lot of positives right now for Paris. And to me, the biggest issue with why Paris is 0-4, the reason why they haven't seen an upset victory yet, is strictly because of Search and Destroy. And they're not gelling in this mode, and it's not as if they're losing a lot of close games. If you are looking at Paris Legion Search Destroy, as I said, the one victory they have, it's in round 11, 1 round away from being 0-5 in S&D. Their other losses are 6-1, 6-3, 6-2, 6-3, 6-1. So they're losing Search Destroys in a commanding fashion. It's not as if this team is, just on the cusp of taking S&Ds. No, this is a roster that we all know has got to be good in Search and Destroy if they want to see their highest peak. This is a great group of players who can be phenomenal in Search and Destroy. Obviously, they've been able to take a few controls here and there. A respawn is just not guaranteed unless it's on Gavutu, it feels like. So I don't know. I feel like in regards to the prediction for this match, it's hard to judge, because if you are the Paris Legion, what is the momentum right now, right? The win has to be out of your sails. You're starting in the losers bracket at the Optic Major. To me, this series just heavily relies on what Paris are we going to see, because I'm choosing Thieves no matter what. It's just really a matter of how many maps, right, that we're going to see Paris take. And I think you could maybe give them a map. The only reason why I'd give Paris potentially a map is because both these teams like Gavutu. Both these teams played each other at the Kickoff Classic. I know the opening hardpoint was a Gavutu. I'm pretty sure the control was on Gavutu as well. Both these teams like to play it. Again, that's a positive if you're Thieves. It also is a positive if you're Paris, because, hey, we haven't won hardly into respawns, but the respawns we have won are on this very map and mode combination. But with them, being 0-4, you just wonder where the momentum comes from. Is there a momentum, sign for them? Hey, going 1-4 is definitely a lot better than being the guaranteed team who's going to be the lowest seed at 0-5. So big proving game if you are Paris, just to try and do something. But I don't know. I hesitate to give them a map. I might, because, granted, it is going to be on Gavutu, so maybe they come out, but I don't know. I think the Thieves walk away with this in 3, despite having some good maps for Paris. It's just the Search Destroy is not there, and that is the one primary way that you can attack a team like the Thieves, is going to be in Search and Destroy. Given all of those things, given what could have been a great opportunity for Legion, I don't have them taking any maps here. And so I have them finishing 0-5. Worst record in the CDL, and again, like all those guys, I wish them nothing but the best. It just is not gelling the way that it needs to. So with that, we'll jump into our second game of Friday. It is the Minnesota Rocker taking on the Atlanta FaZe. Rocker, what an interesting team to talk about right now, right? I mean, one of the harder schedules that we've had a team go through here at Major 1. They sit with a 1-2 record after taking on Optic, after taking on Seattle, and after taking on London. Right, they have the crazy comeback versus Optic. We obviously know that one goes to a game 5, round 11. They also sent Seattle, if you are the Minnesota Rocker, they sent that game to a game 5, round 11, and would have won it had it not been for accuracy. They also are going to have Atlanta, as we talked about for this week, and then LAG later on, which I believe is going to be the day after this game. Yes, they'll play the Gorillas on Saturday. So they've got a big game versus FaZe. And they also have another big one versus LAG. If you take this one versus FaZe, a good chance, right, that you could finish things off with a positive record, especially if you're able to beat a team versus FaZe. You got to have a lot of confidence after that. So I don't know. It's an interesting series for Rocker. But on the other side for Atlanta, right, they had a nice win versus Boston Breach this past week. And despite a lot of early season struggles, and I say a lot, I mean, I should say maybe a glaring few would probably be a better way to describe it, with just Simp not really playing the best Call of Duty that we've seen him play. Just basically Simp not having Simp type performance is another way to describe it. With the slow start that they have to the Kickoff Classic, losing their opening matchup there, and then also, right, coming into that first game versus Paris and going to a game 5, which was odd. But the biggest thing for me is that what's most terrifying about Atlanta is that despite having the best player in the entire world in Simp not play his best Call of Duty, despite the team starting off a little bit slow, they still find themselves 3-0, right? They still find themselves 3-0 from a record standpoint. You would know that nothing is wrong whatsoever. We all know that, it hasn't been the best start for them. But the fact that they're able to do that, and then also on top of all of that, the primary culprits for why Atlanta FaZe sit with a still positive record, or rather a flawless record, is because of Selim and Abizi. Just happened to be number 1 and number 4 in overall KD. To me, Selim looks like one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world. Abizi is putting up some great numbers across the board in all modes as well. And the one thing that I also really liked about FaZe was that in their last series they had versus Breach, where they were able to take it, right? Aristides in the post-game interview was like, hey, I know that people are talking about how there's some, glaring issues in our gameplay, specifically like on Gavutu, for example. We're just going to keep playing it. Like, we really don't care. We're just going to keep playing it. We know that we're a great team. And I think that confidence as well is reassuring if you are somebody looking from the outside perspective, because you wonder, hey, is this team going to waver a little bit? Where's the team's confidence coming into this year, considering they just dominated everybody in Cold War? What is there left to prove? All of those things. And they have been able to answer back in a great way. So I just feel like for Minnesota, it's never going to be an easy series, right? Facing off against a roster like Atlanta, a team that just is stellar in all modes, a team that's going to be consistent in all modes. And the big thing is, if Simp arrives to the level that Simp does, nobody's going to stand a chance, right? Nobody's going to be able to stand a chance if Simp is performing with Selim and Abizi playing the way that they are. We all know what Arceus can provide as well. It's not going to be easy. So again, I give them the edge in the hard point. I think the Minnesota has a chance in the search and destroy, of course, and then we get to the control. I like FaZe there as well. I don't know. I'm going to give this one a 3-1. I think that Minnesota have some fight, given the fact that, hey, this is a huge game for them. I think they're aware of that. I think they're conscious of it. But I give FaZe the W. I wouldn't be surprised if this goes to a game 5 because of the urgency that Rocker have, but I'm taking FaZe, maybe 9 times out of 10. Maybe there's that little, there's a little bit of, I don't know. There's like a little bit of me that wants me to pick Rocker here, just in somewhat of a surprising fashion. But of all the reasons I just mentioned, I'm going to stick with Atlanta for this. So we got 3-0 for Thieves to take down Paris. We have a 3-1 victory for FaZe over Rocker. Then how about the final game of the day? Oh boy, this is going to be a fun one. Optic Texas versus the Toronto Ultra. Toronto coming into this game with a 2-1 record. Optic coming into this game with a 1-2 record. We'll talk about Toronto first. Clinical job, right? Last week. In terms of overall maps, the big thing to note, right? They go 6-0 in maps, both 3-0 victories over the Gorillas and the Florida Mutineers. But what is most impressive about the Toronto Ultra, and some people could say it's actually not impressive at all, I look at it more of a positive than other people, is that all 6 of those maps were close. They had 2 close 3-0 victories. They win a 6-point hardpoint game versus LAG. They beat them in a round 10 search and destroy, and they beat them in round 5 in the control. Versus Florida, a 1-point hardpoint game, a round 11 search and destroy, and a round 5 control. And they win that series versus the Mutineers, right? A crazy 3-0. They also get outslayed by 16 kills, and they have a substitute playing for Cammy. I don't know, man. It just continues to show the teamwork, the confidence, and the ability that this team has in the clutch moments. It's impeccable. And I love to see that because, a lot of people could say, oh, well, take a look at Toronto. Hey, it's like these series just aren't coming as easy anymore. With the way that the CDL works, I expect them to go to, game 4s, game 5s on a typical, I expect them to be tested in every single series. But the fact that they were able to clutch up as often as they were, the fact that they were able to get outslayed, have a substitute, and still beat a great Mutineers roster, it's unbelievable. It really is. And the fact that LAG, they 3-0 them as well. Again, all of those maps were close. LAG then comes in and beats the London Royal Ravens. What does that really tell you about where Toronto sit right now? Very impressed by this team, and it's good to see them rebounding right off of the crazy Game 5 Round 11 that they have at the hands of Seattle just, an opening weekend. And then obviously for Optic, a chance to rebound, right? They have a great rebounding game versus the Paris Legion, a 3-1 victory overall. really nothing to take home about it, right? There's not really a whole lot to mention for Optic Texas. You expect them to walk away with that game. I in no way expected Paris to come out and beat them. I think I put kind of forth a plan a little bit of how Legion could have done that last week, but it was expected, right? It was expected for Optic to win that. They come through, they're able to take it, and we move on from there, right? That's the best way for Optic to move forward, is to recognize, hey, you know what? We lost 2 Game 5 round 11s. One of those being a reverse sweep in opening weekend. Let's just get a W and let's move on. But because of those 2 losses, right? Because of those 2 game losses they have at the hands of Rocker and the Ravens, and now puts them in a bind, because now they have got to go 2-0 if they want to have a positive record coming into their own, by the way, major event. So, and for those that don't know, by the way, it's not guaranteed if you have a losing record that you are going to be in the losers bracket. It's not guaranteed if you have a winning record that you're going to be in the winners bracket. We're still figuring out the numbers. There's a lot of things that can happen when you have 12 teams playing 5 matches each. There's not as much of a sample size, so there's a lot of teams who are going to have a similar record to each other. It's going to come down to a lot of figures. So it's difficult to know, but essentially you feel way more comfortable if you have got a positive record to be in the winners bracket, and you have got a much less confident feeling if you have a losing record coming into the major, because you'll most likely be in the losers bracket. And as we know, double elimination. If you're in winners, you got an extra life. If you're in losers, you have got 1 life. And depending on where you sit, you could be facing off against a great roster early on in the tournament. And that is what I worry about for Optic Texas as well. But getting into the predictions for this match, as we said, it is a huge game for Optic Texas. If they win this, as we said, their chances of starting a winner's bracket get that much better. It's going to be on that final game versus the Breach to be what decides it all for them. As I said, Ultra off of a great week. Again, 6 close maps, but 6 map victories. 3 of those coming with a player that is their substitute and got brought in last second. Big thing in this series is that Optic are prone to strong starts, but falling off as the series progresses. Toronto, outside of their last 2 games, are also prone to slow starts, but do pick up the pace as the series goes on. So that's something that I'm really going to be evaluating throughout this game. It's going to be on Optic, great in the beginning, slow to end. Toronto, slow to start, great to end, outside of their last 2 games, as we said for Toronto. So I think you really look at it. You want to see Optic come out and have a strong start early. That is going to be a huge test for them. They've got to come out. They've got to show something. So far, their early slang numbers, so far, their early hardpoint numbers are, despite some close games, have been excellent. They've been looking phenomenal in the opening. Hardpoint to Search Destroy started to get better as time has gone on so far at the Major 1. But when you're facing off against this Toronto team, it's just difficult. It really is. It's difficult because, I don't know, I just feel like Ultra are always going to have a plan. I feel like Ultra are always going to have a plan for you. They're always going to be ready for strategies that you bring out. They're going to be aware of what you like to play. And I think when it comes down to this series as well, there's a good chance that Optic wants to play Toronto on the small maps, and there's a good chance that Toronto is also ready to play them on the small maps. So with that in mind, I don't know. This one's actually very difficult to call, because if you're Toronto, you feel good, right? You're at 2-1. A good chance that you walk away with this series, et cetera, allows for you to be guaranteed winners bracket. Then you've got the Thieves later on Saturday. I don't know. I think that this one goes to a game 5. I really do. I think this one has got the legs to go to a game 5. I think with Optic, with a lot to work off of and some momentum, in that series versus Paris, I think they've got a chance to take this series. I really do. But it's such a small sample size. Like, you beat Paris. Cool. That's all we have. Toronto are coming off of 2 big victories. I don't know. It just feels weird. Like, I have not fully made my prediction, I guess, when it comes down to this game in regards to who I think is going to take it. I mean, I think that Optic will have a strong start. If they don't, that's a great advantage for Toronto. If Toronto start off slow, hey, well, that's a great opportunity for Optic to come out, maybe win the hard point, possibly take the Search and Destroy, depending on what the maps look like. But I am going to go with Toronto for now. I am going to go with the Ultra. This is a revenge type of game. It's almost a rivalry game if you are Optic. Whenever it was Optic Chicago last year, Toronto Ultra, always the team to stand in their way. And I think that Toronto are going to be that again. I don't know. It's just, as much as I would like to say that, yes, I think that this Optic Texas team has the chance to do it, because I do, that small sample size versus Paris just is not enough for me yet to think that they've got the ability to beat a team like Toronto with momentum at their hand. So we'll see, but I think this is going to go to a game 5. I think that Optic have a great chance of taking this, all things considered, especially if things are getting ironed out, especially if they're improving and know that they have a win under their belt as well. But I am going to go with Toronto to once again be the Optic stoppers, to be the team that just continues to stand in their way. We'll move on to Saturday now. Florida Mutineers taking on the Seattle Surge. We'll start things off with the Surge off a wild last few games. I mean, if you have been watching Seattle, you have been treated to some excellent matches. Matches that have got you on the edge of your seat, right? They go to a game 5 round 11 versus Toronto last week. They go to a game 5 round 11 versus Minnesota this past week. Wild. Absolutely wild. And the fact is, accuracy is the Iceman. That's what I love about this Seattle narrative, is that you have got the young guns. You've got Sid being one of the best players in the game. You have, why can I not think of his name? What's going on here? You have Pred also being one of the best players in the game, and a weird brain fart right there. You have Mac, who looks excellent. And then you have Accuracy, right, who's also able to step in and have these defining moments where he quite vividly is able to steal away these games. The fact that he goes for the defuse versus the Rocker, the fact that, or rather versus Toronto, the fact that he's able to go for a 1v2 versus Minnesota on Tuscan is wild. It is absolutely wild. So there is just a lot of things to be excited about around the Surge. At the same time, the fact that they are going to these game 5 round 11 positions, while you do like, you know, a player like Accuracy to be in these positions, you don't like to be there in general. I mean, there's a very good chance, right, that Kleenex is able to get to that doorway a little faster over at the B-bomb on Berlin, take him off, and they win that game. There's a very good chance that Accuracy does not, as per usual, clutch a 1 versus 2 versus the Minnesota Rocker, and a team as well who is excellent at search and destroy. So I don't know, I feel like you are teetering if you're Seattle. You're happy that you're getting the victories. You're happy that Accuracy is being the Iceman. But when you really take a look back at what has officially taken place, you're like, wait a second. We've gotten kind of close to losing these. I mean, percentage-wise, we could very well have started things off 1-2 rather than 3-0. So with all those things in mind, a good week for Seattle, right? Obviously getting the victories that they do. But at the same time, you talk about, is this something to worry about? Is this a sign of the competition, right? That is starting to catch up to Seattle. Time's going to tell, right? Time is going to tell, but it is very impressive that Seattle is one of 2 teams that currently sits with a unbeaten record, them and the Atlanta FaZe. Talk about the Florida Mutineers, right? Had a very difficult schedule in week number 2. They have games versus LAT and Toronto. Really battled well with the LA Thieves, but lost a very close 3-0 versus the Ultra. As we said, they outslay Toronto by like 16 kills. I want to say it was Skies and Dave Patty who had really good performances in that series. But again, they outslay a team who has a substitute, and you're not able to walk away with any of the maps. Like I said, it's a 1-point hardpoint game, which is wild. It's a round 11 search and destroy. It is a round 5 in the control. There's a lot of situations that could have gone differently, but it just continues to be the narrative around the Mutineers. The same discussion we had with them last year was about the in-game leadership. It's about the clutchability. It's the fact of sometimes showing up for series and being excellent, and sometimes just not being there at all. And not to say that they weren't there in that series versus Toronto, but with all of those things, you expect for the Mutineers to not lose that 3-0. You expect them to at least take 1 map, at the very least. So, I don't know. Something just seems to be off with them. Like I said, if you were to look at the Mutineers' performance so far, right? Outside of looking at, oh, well, this player has stats in this mode. This player has stats in this mode. They've lost to London, LAT, and Toronto. A rough 3 teams, but their one win that they do have is versus Paris. So you basically toss it the win versus Paris because you're like, well, hey, you know what? Paris right now, record-wise, looks like the worst team in the game. You're supposed to beat those guys. But London, LAT, and Toronto, not expected to beat those guys either. So it's another situation of last year where Florida, it feels like, beat the teams that they're supposed to. They lose the teams that they're supposed to. And either sometimes they show up and they 3-1 you, or they get 3-1 themselves. I know this week they didn't have a 3-1 victory or loss, but they, you know, still just in general are not performing the way that at times you feel like they have the opportunity to. So let's just get into this, right? Seattle are going to be the favorites. There's no doubt about it. Seattle are going to be the favorites coming into this game. What does Florida have to do to pull off the upset? First thing to me is that the search and destroy has to be better, and especially in the clutch. Right now, the Mutineers sit with a 1-4 record in search and destroy at the Major 1 qualifiers, with 3 of those 4 losses coming in either round 10 or round 11. So like I said, that whole clutch side of things continues to be the story for them. Florida finds themselves versus top caliber teams, getting beaten opening hard points, most likely losing the search and destroy, and then becoming 50-50 in the control. So early starts, not great for the Mutineers. Typically, it feels like they're getting outslayed, or if they're not getting outslayed, they're just losing close games in the opening hard points. Well, hey, that's a positive for Seattle. So again, don't think the Mutineers have a good chance of taking the opening hard point. There's a chance, right? There's obviously always a chance, but just with the way that Seattle can overwhelm you with their slaying numbers, it doesn't feel good. Then we've got a search and destroy, right? Where, like I said, the Mutineers are 1-4, but they are getting to round 10 and round 11. So you're at least happy about that. The problem for the Mutineers, right, is that you have the Iceman, right? You have the Iceman, you have a team in Seattle who looks excellent in search and destroy. So again, you give that map to the Seattle Surge. Then you jump into control. Seattle's been talked about, right, as being one of the better control teams in the entire game. Given the time, Mutineers have walked away with a few controls of their own. One in particular was one that they had no right of winning. I forget who it was versus. I want to say it was London, where Skies like went absolutely bonkers over at Beach on Gavutu control. So again, just a few different things. I don't know. It's just, for the Mutineers, this is just not a team that I think matchup wise works out well for them. This is just a team that's going to outslay, a team that's going to be very prepared, that's going to be ready off of the rotations, all of those things. Seattle have the ability to slow down as the series progresses, but the problem, like I said, for the Mutineers is that they are very much a hot starting type of roster. If they're not starting off hot, I do not like their chances, and I don't think they're going to have the ability to versus Seattle. So I'm going to have this as a 3-0, maybe a 3-1. I think I'm going to keep it as a 3-0 for now, just to kind of keep up with that trend. I want to kind of get a few more 3-0s. I feel like, for those that have watched LandO's lock-ins over the years, I say over the years, I've done it like for the last, 9-10 months. But I do not like putting 3-1s. I feel like it's just too easy, which it is the most common series record. But I just don't like putting 3-1s just because I feel like sometimes it's a cop-out, even though it's literally the most common record. So with that in mind, I'll stick with 3-0. I don't know. I just feel like the Mutineers are going to come out flat. And if you're Surge, you're still fighting for positioning. You want to have that 4-0 record. You're trying to improve things. And you're trying to get ready for the London Royal Ravens, which is going to be an amazing, amazing series that I cannot wait to watch and to break down here in just a few moments. But before we do that, Boston Breach versus the New York Subliners. A rematch, right, from the Kickoff Classic. The Boston versus New York rivalry now in its first official matchup. And it is a fun one as well, because Boston come into this at a 2-1 record, so they still have a chance of going positive in the Major 1 qualifiers. If they get a W here versus New York, they are guaranteed to have a positive record. If you're New York, you still sit at 0-3. You have yet to win a match, but this is their chance to get a W with royalty. I know we didn't have a chance to last week. I literally uploaded, I finished editing, I had finished exporting the video right as the announcement had started to come out that Neptune was going to be benched for royalty. There had been some talk about it, but I didn't think the conversations were serious enough at the time that I recorded it for me to talk about it before I released the video. So I do apologize about that. But the video title did live up to what we talked about. I think we said like season-defining matches already, and clearly that's the case, as within 2 games, New York had dropped Neptune. 2 official games. Obviously, they played quite a few at the Kickoff Classic. And just to touch on that very, very briefly, because that will be a big talking point in this match, obviously. I was pretty surprised that it did end up happening. I feel like most people should be surprised by that. You've played 2 games, so far throughout the year, a team that's not super well practiced either. So if we're talking about, a lot of people were discussing, well, you've had a lot of time, you've had a lot of practice, a lot of opportunities. You played at the Kickoff Classic. They played like 4 or 5 full games. It's not a surprise that they decided to make a change. To me, it absolutely is. With a player of Neptune's caliber, with the ability that a player like that has, for him to be dropped after 2 games was a little surprising. And then just in terms of like opinion, because I have always this stance that I love to give Roster Mania predictions. I literally started Twitter off of Roster Mania, discussions and all that stuff years ago. I love to talk about roster changes, but there is something that I have learned over time, which is that I will never know about I would never know as much as the players or the organization when it comes down to roster changes. So all of those things in mind, I love to mention that before I talk about a prediction. The way that I assess this from an outside perspective is that I see both sides. I see both sides of the aisle with this, right? Whenever I watched Neptune play in that series, New York versus LAG, I literally stared at his arrow on the minimap the entire time. It just does not look super well versed in what he wants to do. It just seems as if he is not under the assumption of, I'll just say this. He doesn't seem comfortable. He really doesn't. I'm beating around the bush. He doesn't seem comfortable. He doesn't really seem like he knows what he wants to do on the map. And I will say that I don't think that is all just about his knowledge as a player. I think a lot of that has to do, and I think that New York would agree with me. I think Neptune would agree with me. I think the New York staff, the players would agree with me. A lot of this comes in a practice. I think if this team did not come into the Kickoff Classic with 10 days of practice and with, just a really just in general, not practicing as much as everybody else, I think they would be in a much better spot, right? They would have had a much better assessment of where Neptune stood. They would have had a way better assessment on what the roles need to be for this team to succeed. What do they want to do on certain maps? How do we get Neptune and Hydra both comfortable in their respective roles? Because like we said, Neptune, who is a very fast and aggressive player, was in 8 out of their 10 hardpoint maps that they had played, 8 times he was 3rd or 4th in overall engagements. Right? There's something wrong there. And I think that he knows that as well. And to me, a lot of that comes through. To me, a lot of those things slip through the cracks because of the lack of practice that this team had coming into the Kickoff Classic, had coming into the Major 1 qualifiers. So, and I also think too, with this team being totally new, right? Clay and Hydra, join each other at the middle of last season. You bring in Krim to this team. You bring in Neptune, some new faces, a lot of players who have literally never played with each other before. This team, almost more than any other roster, needed more practice, and they got less than everybody else. And so to me, that was the ultimate culprit from why we saw New York make the changes that they did, and to me, the reason why they've struggled the way that they did. Would I have liked to see them keep Neptune? Yes, because I think that Neptune has the ability to be one of the better players in the game, but time will tell. Obviously, he's on the academy team for the moment, and everybody's throwing out #FreeNeptune. So I have no idea what to expect from that. So wanted to get my quick little thoughts out there about that in general. But I am excited to see what Royalty can do. I'm a big fan of Royalty. I think I cast over his first official match, like back in Advanced Warfare. That was my very first title of casting, and that was one of the biggest games that I'd ever casted. It was his debut with Epsilon North America back in AW. So I've been following him for a long time. He's been great, very consistent in challengers over the past 2 seasons. But it's a very tough ask, right, to come into the New York camp and to have to try and put up numbers, to have to try to come in and instantly make a difference. And he was not really able to do that, especially in that opening bocage. Did not play well. Big thing. I instantly noticed it whenever Jay and I were casting. You could instantly tell that ping was a factor. He's sprinting into gunfights. He was not having the greatest of reactions, and a primary reason for that is because he's in Toronto, right? He's in Toronto, not the greatest of internet speeds and things like that whenever New York are playing Boston. So there's a lot to consider when it comes down to that. But I don't know. It is a worrying loss that they have versus the Thieves in that they got outslayed by 59 kills. I feel like that is a series where you want to see Clay and Krim especially put up some major numbers. I feel like, Neptune has been excellent. You don't expect a ton out of Royalty in his very first game, and obviously being in Toronto to put up some big numbers. So for them to get outslayed by 59 kills versus the Thieves was not great. They win the Search Destroy, but they lose all 3 of the respawns. I don't know. It's a weird situation right now for New York, and I don't know if this is going to be the permanent change for them. But time is going to tell. They've played 1 match. It's hard to know exactly where New York sits right now. But I am hoping, right, that Royalty will be in Texas for this game, because as we said, it is a huge game for New York. You're going to be in the losers bracket, but I think that's actually good for NYSL. I think this is a good chance for them to say, you know what? It does not matter. We know we're going to be in the losers bracket. We know we're going to have 1 life when it comes down to the major. Let's just worry about making sure that we are as well prepared for that tournament as we can possibly be, with 2 very good teams to face off against. Obviously, the first one versus Breach, and they will have FaZe the following day. So that will be the ultimate test. But talking about Boston Breach, right? They have a 1-1, record this past week. They take down Paris in a 3-1 fashion. They lose to Atlanta in a 3-1 fashion themselves. Really big thing for Breach right now is that they look great in Search and Destroy. That to me was the ultimate thing for Boston, was that I thought their hard points were going to take a hit. I feel like their Search and Destroys were going to be excellent, especially as the year progressed, and it's happening a lot faster than I thought that it would. And just in general, specifically in hardpoint, they have a 2-4 record in that, with both of their hardpoints coming in one series, rather both of their hardpoint victories coming in one series, and that being versus the Paris Legion. So if you're looking at what Boston has done, granted playing against solid teams, but if you look at their record outside of playing Paris and hardpoint, they have yet to win a hardpoint that is not versus the Legion. They're also 1-3 in control. All of those all of those games have gone to a round 5. Even going back to the Kickoff Classic. So when I said that I fully expect this team to be in more of a Search and Destroy form, I thought they would still be a little bit better at respawns, but that is something that is worrying for the Boston Breach, because you have Capsule, who's having a great performance in hardpoint. He's having a great performance really across the board. The other 3 players have not stepped up to the level that you'd like to see yet. We've had some pop-up moments from TJ. Nero has had his map. Methods, I feel like, is being consistent. But you really need that second player and that third player to really set the precedent when it comes down to these matches. And like I said, Breach coming to a big game versus NYSL. This is a big proving game for Boston. It's another big game for New York with all the pressure that they have got on them as well. And like I said, Breach, they just need one win. They just need one win to have a positive record, with NYSL and Optic left on Sunday. New York have Boston and Atlanta. I feel like NYSL are going to have to gain some confidence with this team right now with Royalty in the lineup. But if you are Boston, this series is all about respawns. If you can take the opening hardpoint, you are in a much better spot, because you are not guaranteed, but you're in a good place to take the Search and Destroy. Like I said, Boston are 4-0 in Search and Destroy at the Major 1 qualifiers. And again, if you are New York, you take the opening hardpoint, it's basically a necessity. If you do not take that, Boston have a great chance of taking the Search and Destroy, and you could be down 2-0. And with your roster already being 0-3, you just don't like their chances to turn things around. But without going even further in depth, because I feel like I've talked about this series for the past 35 minutes, I am going to go with New York in a Game 5. I feel like the Breach team isn't as complete as they need to be. New York, as I said, I think they come into this with pressure, but without any pressure at the same time. I don't think they're worried about the record. I think they are just worried about trying to improve coming into the major. I think the Royalty is going to be in a better spot. I think he's going to be feeling more comfortable. I'm hoping that he's in Texas. If he is, that is way better for this team as well. I don't know what to expect for New York coming into the major. That'll be a different conversation. But I do believe that they are able to take down the Breach in a Game 5. I think they'll win the final Search and Destroy. I think they'll take the opening hardpoint versus Boston, and maybe the control as well. So maybe a 1-3-5 type of situation. We'll see. But that's one of the bigger surprises that I'm going to have for this week is New York rebounding, beating the Breach, and once more winning in a Game 5 in the New York versus Boston rivalry. We're going to move on. Minnesota versus LAG. Minnesota 1-3 record. LAG with a 2-2 record last week. I have got Rocker losing to Atlanta 3-1. We already talked about their performance last week. Again, it's just another difficult matchup if you're Rocker, right? It's just another test in which they have a very difficult schedule. It's another tough team to face off against in the Gorillas, who are excellent in respawns, who are off of a major upset versus the London Royal Ravens as well. Which again, talk about the Gorillas. This is their only game. This is their only game this week. This is where they get the opportunity to prepare. They've got a lot of positives going for them right now. As well, right? And this is their chance. This is their one game where they can put themselves in a winning record type of situation. So if you're not already motivated, Asim talked about that in his game-winning interview versus the London Royal Ravens. He said, hey, we knew we had to win this game. They were able to do that, and I think that is their primary focus. But I was very impressed, right, in that game that they had versus the Ravens. They came into that series with a plan. Jay and I laid it out, right? They knew that they wanted to play Gavutu hardpoint versus this team. They did not decide to play Tuscan, which technically fits their play style better. They decided to play Gavutu. They decided to put Asim on an AR, and he was able to perform from there. They win a clutch round 11 search and destroy. They lose the control, but they answer back in the following hard point in that game 4. And like I said, from that moment, you just felt like at the opening hard point victory on Gavutu, where they pull out a strategy like that, you instantly felt like they had a chance. And for ASIM to go plus 20, Slasher to go plus 12, I mean, those guys deserve their flowers. ASIM especially deserves his flowers. He just has the ability to take over series. Very impressed with what I saw from LAG, and excited to see what they can do in this game. Because at this moment, right, LAG are 6-1 in hardpoint. Search Destroy is still up in the air, and they're still losing controls. Minnesota, we know what their struggles are. It's going to be in respawn, but on a hardpoint specifically. And I feel like we know on paper how this series is going to look, right? LAG to take game number 1, Minnesota to take the Search Destroy in game 2. The control to me is the one that's in the that's up in the air. That to me will be the question on this series: is who is going to lock up the control. I think the mentality is going to be big here for Rocker, but I don't think that this team is affected as easily by stuff like that. I don't know. I have this one going to a game 5, and it's difficult because I feel like everybody would expect, right, for the Gorillas to come in and for them to control this series. And I think that all signs point to that. But if you were to look at Rocker, the controls that they have been close. They've been winning them. Last year, Rocker were great in control. Off of a loss versus FaZe, obviously, they know that they're not going to be in the winner's bracket. LAG, this is their chance. But I'm going to go Minnesota. I am. I'm currently going to say Minnesota. This is a series I may go back and change. But for right now, I just have a feeling the Rocker are going to come out and they're going to play much better. Again, this series versus FaZe, it's not going to be easy. I think they get, very well handled by Atlanta, but they come back, they beat a solid team in LAG, and they prevent the Gorillas from having a positive record. I don't know why. It's just the way that I feel. I feel like I've been pretty accurate with Gorilla predictions so far, at least initial reactions. We'll see if that comes to pass. All right, final game of Saturday. It is the Toronto Ultra taking on the Los Angeles Thieves. It's a game fuel marquee match, which means double points. We love double points. We'll see what we can do with that. I got Thieves winning earlier on in the week versus Legion. They get a nice 3-0 win there. Toronto Ultra off of a big game versus Optic Texas. So both of these teams come into this match with a 3-1 record. All right, we'll get right into this match because we've already talked about these teams and we've been talking for a while. The interesting thing about this series is going to be in the veto process. So in hardpoint, Ultra's auto veto in hardpoint is Gavutu. LAT's is Berlin. Big thing, Ultra like Berlin, Thieves like Gavutu. So both of these teams, not intentionally, don't like the other team's best map. So we will probably not have a great map for Berlin hardpoint, which Toronto likes. We'll probably also not have the Gavutu hardpoint that we all know that the Thieves really like. So with that being the case, we'll probably have a Tuscan and a Bocage hardpoint. And when these teams played each other at the Kickoff Classic, because this is a rematch right from the Kickoff Classic, the semifinal, LAT took the Bocage dominantly, and Toronto made an unbelievable comeback on Tuscan game 4, and they were able to send that to a game 5 in which they were able to take down a Bocage S&D. So if you're looking at this one, you expect to see the same maps, at least in regards to the hard points. I think S&D wise, we give Toronto the edge on that. So again, you have hard points. Who knows how those go? But the Search Destroy, you give Ultra the edge. And then the coin flip to me is going to be interesting because Thieves may want to play Tuscan, but I think primarily they'll want to play Gavutu for obvious reasons. If you're Toronto, I feel like you absolutely want to play Tuscan, not just because you're better on Tuscan, but also because it's the Thieves, for God's sake, on Gavutu. They already don't like, Gavutu hardpoint. So with that in mind, I think that they would much rather play a Tuscan control versus this team. So not only are the hardpoints going to be important because both teams don't get to play their best, but the coin flip is going to be a big deal because obviously the team that wins the coin flip gets to choose the control. And I think both teams would much rather play a different control map on this series. So with that in mind, also, I forgot to mention this. I wanted to mention this one tidbit. I wrote this down intentionally. So and getting back on the control conversation, and talking more about the coin flip side of things. While Thieves did beat Ultra on Tuscan Control at the Kickoff Classic, Ultra are 4-0 outside of that series specifically. Thieves are 0-3 outside of that win as well. So that is the reason why I feel that Thieves will want to play Gavutu. That is also the reason why if you're Ultra, you will want to play Tuscan. Why? Because Thieves, despite that victory versus Ultra, have not looked great on it. Ultra, despite losing that game versus Thieves, have been great in every other series but that one. So again, a lot of this is going to come down to the coin flip. A lot of this is going to come down to the vetoes. And a lot of this will come down to the SMGs. It's going to come down to that decision making. It's going to come down to the communication. And to me, one of the biggest ways that if you are Thieves to take down this Toronto team is going to be in the Game 2 Search and Destroy specifically. And right there, in my eyes, you're looking at somebody like Envoy to really step it up. I think he's only at like a 0.7, like a 0.78, 0.77 right now in Search and Destroy. We know the talent, right, that Envoy has. He had an excellent series not that long ago. I forget who he played against, but he was like lighting it up in every single match, or rather in every single map. I think if he could be crafting the Search and Destroys, you know, very similar to a Bance who likes to always be on the flank, who likes to be annoying. I don't know. I think it's going to be a really fun matchup to watch. And obviously with this being the Game Fuel marquee match, both teams with the 3-1 record, if you take this, you know, you ride off into the sunset with a fantastic record, a top, you know, level seeding, because 3-1 versus 2-2 would be a major deal. Or rather, excuse me, a 4-1 record versus a 3-2 record would be a much different story when it comes down to seeding. So I am going to give Toronto the edge. I will. I think that Toronto are at least going to trade one of the hard points. I think that they do win the Search and Destroy, and I think the Control coin flip wise could go either way. So the way that I look at this is I don't see Thieves winning both the hard point and the Control. I think Toronto take one of those at the very least, and then I think they're able to trade the other hard point as well. So with that in mind, to me, Search and Destroy is the biggest thing. If Thieves can take that along with a Control or a hard point, be up 2-1, guarantee that game 5, you're in a much better position. But we all know, right? The biggest thing for me, Toronto, they have been the kings of clutch. They have been so good in these later stages. And if they can come into this week, right, beating Optic Texas in a game 5, then beating Thieves 3-1, they've got to be one of the favorites, if not on, you know, without question, like top 2 favorite coming into the major one. Just given the record, given these difficult matchups, and given the fact that they've been, like I said, super clutch in these last few matches. So with that, I think the Ultra take it, but I think it's going to be a great series. I hope it is. It better be a great series. I got to take a drink. All right, let's move on. Okay, this to me is one of the most anticipated matches of the entirety of the Major 1 qualifiers. I have been waiting for this game. Seattle Surge versus the London Royal Ravens. It is a rematch from the Kickoff Classic in which Seattle actually 3-0'd London to start things off. And I was a huge fan of the London Royal Ravens coming into the Kickoff Classic, and that just spoiled everything for me. It really did. It spoiled everything for me. I was hoping to see a better showing from the Ravens. I know a few of the maps were close, but still, and with Seattle doing the things that they did, I don't know. It basically spoiled the start of the hype train that the Ravens had coming into the Kickoff Classic. But, right, we know the story. 3-1 for London, 4-0 for Seattle, as long as, you know, my predictions go the way that I expect them to. Last week for the Ravens, they go 1-1. Great victory versus the Rocker, in which they dominate the first 2 maps. They made Rocker look human in the Search Destroy. And then they come into that series versus the Gorillas, and they lose it 3-1. They go down 2-0 off the rip. They lose both the hard points. Interesting series versus the Gorillas. Like I said, Asim and Slasher looked excellent. You could tell they had a plan. And that to me is really going to be a lot on the Ravens for the future, because I think if the Ravens beat the Gorillas last week, this is an even more difficult prediction to give, considering the fact that Seattle, who are going to be off of a victory versus Florida earlier in the week, according to my prediction, both of these teams would be undefeated. Both of these teams would be 4-0 coming into this game, and it would be a deciding factor on who was going to be 5-0, potentially along with the Atlanta phase. As long as Atlanta can go 2-0. So, I don't know. This is a hard one. Like I said, if you're the Ravens, a huge game just in general. I think this is their only matchup this week. Yes, it is. So this is a great chance for them to improve their seeding. As we said, 3-2, much different than 4-1. At the same time, for Seattle, you are thinking about that number 1 seed. You are thinking about trying to have the best record without a doubt. And I think they'll be motivated to try and secure that for seeding. This is going to be a difficult one. And it would be, like I said, harder, especially if London would have beaten the Gorillas in their last series. But it's just a really fun game because you see a almost identical lineup in which you have the old veteran AR who is keeping the troops in check, who is going to be, playing for the overall objective of the game. Players who have clutch genes, obviously accuracy more in that title than Zero, but Zero, unbelievably unselfish player. And then when you look at the flexes of both these teams, Sib and Gizmo look like two of the best players in the entirety of the game. Mac, who has been excellent coming into his 3rd season. Afro, who has been excellent coming into his 2nd season. And then you have these excellent, rookie SMGs in Nasty from the Raven side and Pred from the other side. So it's a hard call. It really is. It's a hard call. But the way that I look at this series, and I'm just gonna go back and forth, right? I think Seattle takes game 1. I think the Ravens then take the search and destroy. I then think Seattle takes the control. Maybe the Ravens come back in the hard point, and then Seattle takes the game 5. I think that Seattle and London, it's just an all-out battle. It comes down primarily, to that control, who's able to take it, because I think both these teams are going to trade or have a very good chance of trading. And the hard points and the search and destroys, I think there's more questions on the Ravens because, people are going to expect them to beat the Mutineers, will Seattle. But the Ravens coming off that loss versus the Gorillas, do they look more human? Have teams finally started to figure this roster out, et cetera, et cetera? But I think that Seattle take it in a 3-2. I might say 3-1, but I'm going to go with 3-2 for now. I feel more comfortable about this one going to a game 5, but I think it's going to be a wild series, a much different game than what we saw at the Kickoff Classic, which was a 3-0, like I said, in favor of Seattle. Moving on. Optic Texas taking on the Boston Breach. I have got Boston losing. I have got Boston losing to the New York Subliners coming into this game. I have got Optic also losing to the Toronto Ultra coming into this game. Both teams with their head down. Boston with a 2-2 record. Optic Texas with a 1-3 record. Optic no longer have a chance of getting a positive record coming into their major. Breach still with a chance. Breach still have an opportunity. When I look at this game, Optic, like I said, have looked great in the early hard points. I think their search destroy is getting better. Not necessarily on a Breach level, but I trust them more in the respawns. We need to see Breach play better. We need to see Breach have a much better performance in the respawns and not in control, but in hardpoint. We need to see them take commanding victories in hardpoint. That to me will be the way that they can take down some of these Titan-like rosters, which I feel like Optic will only continue to get better at as time goes on. But I'm going to be straightforward with this. I think that Optic take this, and I actually have it as a 3-0. I do. I think that Optic are able to best the Breach and the search destroy. I like them more in the hardpoint. I like them more in the control. Nothing more to be said. I think that Boston have high spirits coming into this match. Obviously, off of a loss versus New York is going to hurt. And with that, I think that they also crumble coming into 2 different opportunities where they can have a positive record coming into Major 1. And unfortunately for Boston, I think that they dropped the ball in both of these series. Crazy. But again, these are the storylines that we love to see. I love Boston, but this is just the way that I've got it going for right now. And then finally, our final matchup of the Major 1 qualifiers, our final game of week 3 here on Sunday. New York Subliners versus the Atlanta FaZe, and in a game fuel marquee match, FaZe off of a win versus Rocker, according to my predictions. Subliners off of a win versus Breach, according to my predictions. Atlanta 4-0, NYSL 1-3. To me, both teams are going to give it their all. I think without a doubt. And you could say, well, FaZe are up 4-0. They're thinking, hey, we're taking on this New York team who are still trying to figure things out. We may come into this match not really caring a whole lot. I don't think that's the case. I think Atlanta want to beat Krim. I think Abizi wants to beat Krim. I think Simp wants to beat Krim. I think Celium, I think Arstes, they want to beat Krim 6. I think they're motivated coming into this match simply for that. I think they also want to show everybody that they can go 5-0 despite not having the greatest start to a season again. That would be the ultimate slap in the face to everybody who thought maybe this team is crumbling. For them to start off 5-0 and to beat Crim 6 in the process of it. I don't know. I just think it's a difficult test for New York. I really do. I mean, I like the fact that they're able to beat Boston. Like I said, the primary culprit for why I have Breach losing both of these series is strictly just because of respawns. And I think that New York are maybe able to take a close hard point, take a close control, search, destroy goes their way, etc. But that's not going to be the case versus FaZe. It's just not. It's not going to be the same story versus a team like FaZe. I give FaZe the 3-0, 3-1 victory. I think that Atlanta just coming to this, wanting to ride out, wanting to show everybody that they were wrong. And they want to try and claim that #1 seed, which would be alongside the Seattle Surge. So if we are looking at teams to finish off with a positive record, or rather to finish off with the #1 seed, I got Seattle finishing off 5-0, and I've got FaZe also ending things out 5-0. Breach just a little bit too short. Optic not able to win both of their games this week, but they do get a nice dub versus Breach. Still not able to take down the Ultra. Rocker also go 1-1. Gorillas with a chance to get the positive record. They're not able to do that. And then the Thieves also finish off 1-1. They get into the winner side as well. But yeah, like I said, I think some interesting predictions. Some 3-0s that I think is good to throw into the mix as well. Just in general, I'm excited for this week. I think it's going to be fun, but I'm going to leave my predictions here for now. I think this one is a chance. There's a chance I might change this. But we'll see. We'll see. Let me know down in the comments what your guys' thoughts are on my predictions. Let me know on Twitter as well. Feel free to tweet at me. Let me know what are your thoughts coming into week number 3 of our Major 1 qualifiers. Who's going to make it through? Who's not going to make it through in terms of winners versus losers? It's going to be a great week. It's going to be fun to watch, and it's going to be a blast to commentate over as well. If you don't really know anything about pick'ems, you just listen to this, you're like, actually, this kind of sounds fun. You can feel free to visit the link in the description. I will put the link there where you can make your own pick'ems yourself. It's free. It's easy to do. You just got to sign up. And you also have the ability to win some prizes. I know COD League has been doing that throughout all of the major weeks. You have the opportunity to win some cash, win some prizes along with that as well, which is awesome. So make sure and do that. It doesn't hurt you. It makes it more intense when it comes down to the games because you want to make sure that your pick'ems are right. But yeah, appreciate you guys for tuning in. Whenever I see you next, it will be for our Major 1 breakdown. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a great time, and I look forward to seeing you all there as well. But best of luck to all of our pick'ems. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already. I appreciate all the support that we've seen in the videos, and I'm hoping that we can only continue to elevate this series. But thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all here at our final week of online play at week 3 of our Major 1 qualifiers.